Hello and welcome to another one of our videos from Combat Fusion Martial Arts. This InfoPod video is on the technique obscure sword. Now this is quite a short base technique, longer extension but a short base, but within this base it contains quite a few principles. And we'll be looking at about 4 of those principles and studying them in the opening sequence. Now we're going to get straight into that video and we're going to look at it as usual from the 3 different perspectives without a partner. Then we're going to have a small talk about the principles and where the technique gets its name from, get into the breakdown and then some variations at the end. So let's take a look at obscure sword. Before we get into the breakdown of the technique, we're going to take a look at some of the principles that are involved in obscure sword. These principles are mainly in the opening sequence, and as such we'll take this chance to take a look at how the technique gets its name as well. The main principles we're going to look at are purposeful defiance and borrowed force, and also zones of obscurity. We'll also take a quick look at purposeful compliance. Now, purposeful defiance is the default principle we start teaching obscure sword for our students. And we start it in the standard way when my back is to my opponent. In this position, my opponent Mark grabs my shoulder. Now he's doing a cross grab, which means in this case he's grabbing my right shoulder with his left hand. And I don't know the reason why I'm being grabbed, so my natural instinct is to look to see what's going on. Now, at this point, he could pull me towards him. Now if I step with this is the opposite principle we have to purposeful defiance, which is purposeful compliance. I'm complying with his wishes, but I'm doing it with purpose. So as he pulls me back in this case, I can hand sword him in the throat. But the question is, how do I know if it's not a friend of mine? It may be somebody just trying to get my attention. So is it really useful for me to just hand sword somebody in the throat because they grabbed my shoulder and pulled me towards them? We'll go over this later on in the end video when we discuss some of the variations. But for now, we're going to go to the opposite principle, which is purposeful defiance. Now, with purposeful defiance, again, in this case, I've got my back towards my opponent, and as he comes in to grab me, I look to see who it is. Okay, is it my friend or is there a threatening gesture? He might threaten me with verbal abuse, or he may present a fist to hit me. So as I see out of the corner of my eye, he places his hand up in a threatening gesture, I obviously want to get away from it. So I use my natural gait to move forward. When we talk about the natural gait, we're talking about how we walk. If I walk towards the camera, when I take a step with my left foot, I counterbalance this step by swinging my right arm. So when we walk, we naturally walk left hand, right arm and so forth. We counter swing our arms to balance ourselves when we're walking. So that's what I term a natural gait. Here, as Mark's grabbed me and I notice he's threatening me, I take a chance to try to escape from the situation by using just a straightforward walk. Now as you can see here, now I've made Mark stretch. Because don't forget, if somebody grabs you, they're grabbing you for a reason, and it's very unlikely they're going to let go. Now, for whatever reasons he's grabbed me, he's not going to be happy with me being over here, and he is now out of posture. So his natural instinct is to pull me back this way. Okay, now as you can see, as he's pulling me back, my hand is on a line to his throat. So purposeful defiance here, again I've got my back to my opponent, Mark grabs my shoulder, I step forward and defy him. This creates his lack of posture and he is now uncomfortable with the position he's in and the position I'm in. So he's going to want to get back into a position he's happy with. So as he pulls me back into the position he's happy with, I borrow that force and hand sword him to the throat. This is purposeful defiance creating borrowed force. Although we practice the technique in this manner, the likelihood of somebody attacking me from the rear to overwhelm me by grabbing my shoulder and pulling me towards them, I would say is very unlikely. If Mark was going to attack me from the rear, he'd want to subdue me. So he's more likely to come in with a bear hug, or he's likely to come in with a headlock, something that's going to subdue me and control me. The likelihood of him grabbing me and turning me towards him to punch me is a possibility. I would just say it's fairly unlikely. If he wanted to subdue me, he's going to want to control me. However, if we were in this position and we were having an argument and Mark was getting into my personal space, as he walked in, I might push him away to say, stay back. And as he does that, I might turn away from him to leave the area because I don't want any problems. So in this case, Mark comes to my area, I push him away and I go turn to leave. He grabs me there, and my turning to leave is the actual purposeful defiance. And then again, he pulls, I borrow the force and strike him to the throat. So we'll cover that concept of facing and turning away again at the end when we talk about variations. Now, I also said we talk about the name of the technique. So the technique is called obscure sword. So if Mark comes behind me now, in this position, as Mark is grabbing my shoulder and I'm moving away, as you can see, my striking hand is now in front of my body. To Mark, it's in an obscure zone because my body is obscuring the weapon. It's not that Mark now doesn't understand the fact that I've got two arms. But when he turns me, when he's pulling me, his focus is not on my hands, it's on my eyes. This is where he's going to be focused, all right? So because he's focused on my eyes, he's most probably going to have a form of tunnel vision. So the focus here keeps my hand in an obscure zone. So it's obscured by my body. And as I turn, it comes up from an obscure zone here. Okay, so that's how the technique gets its name. It gets its name from my initial movement. As I step away from the grab here, my hand's in an obscure zone. And then as Mark pulls me back towards him, my hand comes up from an obscure zone, tracking up between us, guidelining up his body to strike to the throat. So that is how we teach obscure sword in the opening sequence for our students, getting the principles of purposeful defiance, borrowed force, obscure zones, and a little bit of purposeful compliance in there as well. So that's just giving you an opening idea on those principles. Now we'll get into the breakdown of the technique, and at the end, as I said earlier on, we'll get into the variations.
When the attack occurs, ensure your initial step is placed in such a position that on rotating towards your opponent, it will place your stance correctly on a toe-to-heel line running through your opponent's centre line. As you rotate to face your opponent, commence the delivery of the obscure sword, timing the weapon impact with the completion of your rotation into a forward bow. Immediately follow up with a rear leg snapping kick to your opponent's groin. This kick should flow smoothly and effectively due to the previously selected correct toe-to-heel line and forward bow. On delivery of the groin kick, ensure you employ midpoint balance to enable the quick replanting of the kicking foot to its point of origin. From here, cover out as required in the base model. We shall now proceed on to the extension to obscure sword. If you do not require this information at your stage in training, you may wish to bypass the next section of this video. If continuing into the extension, when planting your kicking leg back to its point of origin, deliver an inward downward diagonal hammer fist to the side of your opponent's head, causing him to face away from you. Now immediately begin to step with your rear foot into a rear crossover as you execute an outward vertical strike to your opponent's nose. As you finish settling into your rear twisted stance, convert the outward elbow strike into an upward elbow to your opponent's chin, with your free hand checking underneath your striking arm. Quickly begin to execute an in-place rotation out of the rear twisted stance, simultaneously converting the upward elbow to a back elbow to your opponent's solar plexus. Complete the rotation out of the rear twisted stance into a neutral bow as you further convert the back elbow into a hammering claw and grab to your opponent's groin. As your opponent reacts to the grab to his groin, step immediately 180 degrees to his rear, ripping his groin as you go and utilizing your free arm's elbow as a check to your opponent's shoulder. Convert this elbow check to a heel palm to the same shoulder, whilst having your unoccupied arm join at its respective shoulder as well. Immediately convert these twin heel palms into grabs and rip down, pulling on your opponent's shoulders as you immediately deliver an upward vertical knee to your opponent's coccyx, causing him to move forward and up onto his toes. Please ensure extra care for your training partner when executing this move. As your opponent moves up and slightly forward, employ marriage of gravity to plant your knee and leg forward and between your opponent's legs, simultaneously executing twin downward diagonal heel palms to his hips. Ensure you contour fit your heel palm strikes comfortably to your opponent's body. These strikes are intended to collapse your opponent's structure at the knees, sending him forward face down to the floor. As your opponent lands face down, follow him staying between his legs as you rear crossover or drag step out into a reverse bow to deliver a rear stomp to his groin. From here, front crossover, stomping his knee or ankle joint as you cover out.
And welcome back. So now we're going to take a look at those variations. But before we do, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't done so already, please think of subscribing to our channel. Our analytics show that only 30% of the people who look at our videos are actually subscribed members. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Also, if you can, give the video a like and give it a share so your friends get to see the video as well. Right, so now let's get into the variations. We've got quite a few different ones to look at, mainly all working from the first opening counter strike. Some of the variations will be used in a manner that takes the technique's aggression to a lower level. We'll be looking at the counter strike in the initial move, how it can be used with different intent. We'll also be looking at several counter attacks from our opponent. So let's get in and have a look at the variations. And welcome back. So now we're going to take a look at the variations we can do when working with the obscure sword. I'm just going to bring my partner on mark. Now we're going to take a look at the principle of purposeful compliance using the technique obscure wing, which is a family related technique to the technique we're looking at in this video, obscure sword. So if I turn my back on my partner Mark and he grabs and pulls for obscure wing, he's going to pull me into a range which is close to him. So as he pulls back, I'm going to use a short range weapon here to strike him in the solar plexus. Then I could, if necessary, carry on with the technique obscure wing. However, if Mark reacts sufficiently to the strike to his solar plexus by moving backwards and away from me, as shown here, so as he pulls me back, we move in with purposeful compliance and he moves away, I can now use sequential flow and move into obscure sword and strike to the neck and continue on with the technique itself. Now then, as I said in the beginning, we don't know really what the intention of the attacker is. It could be a friend just getting my attention, or it could be somebody letting me know I dropped my wallet on the floor in a shop. It doesn't really warrant me turning and immediately hand sword to the opponent's throat. So what we could use is taking this down and subduing the actual aggression in the technique and converting the hand sword to a simple check, push away to the partner if they come in too close to us. So what I mean is, as I'm here and turn away, Mark grabs and pulls me towards him. As I turn, instead of me going straight to a hand sword to his throat, as he pulls, I might just push the person away to get him out of my personal space. So the hand sword action is still there, the obscure hand sword is still there, but I take it down from a strike to a vital area of the body, this is one of our vital targets, the throat, to a simple heel palm push and check away to get him out of my zone. Now, as you can see, as soon as I've done that, I'm already in a fighting stance ready to receive any counter attack that he may try and attempt. So now let's get into the meat of obscure sort. And let's look at Mark as the attacker's intention. What we're going to say here is, as he pulls me back after my perfect defiance, his intention is to land a punch to my face. So here, as Mark grabs, I step away. His intention now is to pull me around and land a punch to my face. Here, I may not get the hand sword to its target. So at a moment's instant, I may have to change the intent of my strike from an attacking strike to a defending block. And what I mean by that is this: as I'm grabbed by Mark, I step away and he throws his punch. My hand sword may connect with the outside of his arm. So I've missed my target of his throat, but I've been able to deflect his intended punch to my face. So one of the techniques that screams at us from this situation is the technique crossing talon. As I'm grabbed from behind, I step away with perfect defiance. Mark pulls. I counter his attack with my hand sword, which now becomes a defense rather than an attack, and that allows me to walk straight through and do the technique, if necessary, crossing talons. So taking that position again, another technique that jumps out at you is the technique fatal deviation. So from here, as Mark grabs my shoulder, I turn and pulls, I defend his block, bring it down, punch to the face, hand sword to the throat, front crossover, knee to the groin, elbow to the face, hammer fist back down to the groin. So because we're on the outside of the body, there's a multitude of techniques we can actually do. For instance, another one that jumps out at me is flashing wings. So from here, there's the grab, I move, turn, there's the check, block, elbow, hand sword, check, thrust to the face. Plenty of techniques could be done to this one on the outside of the body. Those are just three. Have a think about some of the others you can do. Now then, one of the problems I have always seen in Kenpo is, it's nobody's real fault, it's just a habit people get into, is starting Kenpo techniques from this standard position. It's almost as though people say, let's do Kenpo techniques, and everybody stands and waits for the attack with their hands by the sides. I'm not saying you wouldn't be attacked with your hands by the side, of course there is every possibility you could be, but it's not good to stay in this position all the time. So it's worthwhile finding different positions to place yourself when you're attacked. So in this case, one of the normal standing positions you have is people with their arms folded. And when I say arms folded, I don't mean like this. See, this is the typical I'm code sort of folded arms when you've got your hands tucked in this position. This is not good for you in a self-defense situation, because here, if Mark puts one hand on top of my arms there, he has now trapped both my arms by pushing my upper arm down onto my other arm. If I'm going to fold my arms, I like to fold it in such a way as I'm either cradling my arms, this manner, or generally what I do is I rest one arm on the back of my other hand. And this manner allows me to slip this hand out. So if Mark should pin my hand out, I can slip my hands out if necessary and use them in a defensive mode. So here, with my arms folded, and Mark does the attack again here, as I step forward now, I turn and see his punch coming, I've got a choice. Which hand do I use first? So I'm going to use my closest hand to the weapon, which is my upper hand, here, and then to here, and then to here, and then to there. So we're using the technique circles of protection. But did you notice that circle of protection on the opposite side? So this is where it's important to become ambidextrous with your techniques. I could go into circles of protection on the strong side. In that sense, as Mark grabs, I move and pulls, I block with my right hand, but now I have to step through and use the technique on the conventional side. Do I really want to take that time for a step through? I may not. I don't know the situation that I'll find myself in, but I need to have both options ready. If I need to do it off the opposite side because it's more effective or more efficient, then I need to have that skill. So another position you can work on is maybe having your hands on top of your head. Don't interlock your fingers, because that's going to be the same situation as tucking your hands in when you're folding your arms. Just layer your hands on top of each other so you can still escape if necessary. So from here, Mark's going to grab my shoulder, I'm going to define him, he's going to pull me back, I'm going to block, and I'm going to come through and do the technique attacking mace. Because at that point, that was the technique that felt most comfortable to me. Okay, so another variation you can do on the outside of the body is, as Mark comes in and grabs, my hands are up on my head, So as I turn, he throws a punch which is going to hit early this time. It's going to get me before my arm turns around to be able to do the defence, as we saw with attacking mace. So from here, as he punches, he comes early, I can defend this manner and maybe work into the technique circling wing. But I have to work on the timing of his punch and do what is efficient for me at that point in time. There's no this will happen or that will happen. You have to try to practice as many options as you can. And remember, this one is taking the punch before you get fully turned, and it's the outside of the arm that takes it down, traps it as in circling wing, finger thrust to the eye, check the arm, upward elbow, and then reverse hammer fist to the groin. Whereas what we did before, with the technique which used attacking mace, is Mark's punch was after this arm had passed my centre line, and it was just a defence with this arm, reverse punch, and follow up for attacking mace. So there's two variations there from a very tight timing issue. It's all about when that punch is launched and when it's about to impact your body. You have to practice these different variants in timing as well. So let's take a look at another variation. This time what Mark's going to do is he's going to do a grab to my lapel rather than the punch. So he's going to grab me with both hands as he's turning me around. So as he grabs my shoulder to turn me, I defy him, he turns and he grabs. Now from here, you'll note my hands were already in a good position because I had them up high around my waist. So from here, I can now simply move in this way and work to take heavenly ascent. Okay, so let's have a look at this final idea for a variation. And this time, we're going to say Mark, maybe he's got a little bit of fighting skill. So when I defend against his punch, this time he has enough knowledge of fighting to be able to apply a figure 4 arm lock to my defending arm. So from there, what we're going to do is we're going to use the technique entangled wing to defeat his counter-attack to our defence. So from here, Mark grabs, I defy, I pull, he punches, there's the figure 4 arm lock, 1, 2, and we end out with entangled wing. I'll show you that one more time a little bit slower. So, he grabs, I move, he pulls, there's my defence. From here, he immediately starts the figure 4 arm lock. I move in with his movement, elbow to up under his chin. There I've got his arm locked, back elbow to his left kidney, back elbow to his solar plexus, then finish out with the base extension to entangled wing. Okay, thank you, Mark. No problem. So, there's a few variations for you to play with on Obscure Sword. It's a very short base, so it's very restrictive to what you can actually do. Most of the stuff's going to come from this hand sword on the turn. But have an experiment, see what you can come up with, and take it from me, there's plenty more options than the few we've looked at tonight. But thank you very much for joining us. All the best.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here on another one of our InfoPod videos. I hope you find the information of use. Now, if you have any questions or any ideas or any comments, please put them down in the comment section. We do answer all of the questions we get. So with that being said, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. So again, as Andy Seaton saying goodbye, and thank you very much for joining us.